For decades, the world believed every secret of Princess Diana had already been unearthed, but deep inside a private royal archive sealed, catalogued, and untouched, sat a letter no one was supposed to find. A letter written in Diana's own hand, a letter that would shake Prince William to his core, and when he finally read the name inside, everything changed, because it wasn't addressed to him or to Harry. It named someone else entirely. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The reopening of the vault was meant to be routine, a quiet administrative review of Diana's preserved belongings, her handwritten notes, private correspondence, and personal treasures long shielded from public view. No announcement. No ceremony, just protocol. Yet fate placed Prince William inside those walls that day, present not as a grieving son, but as a future king overseeing the careful management of legacy. It was supposed to be procedural. It became personal. Among neatly catalogued files and sealed archival boxes rested a slim envelope, slightly aged but unmistakable. The handwriting across its surface carried the graceful slant William knew by heart. His mother's hand, his mother's voice. Time seemed to tighten around him. Palace officials exchanged restrained glances, their composure thinning just enough to betray discomfort. The envelope had never been logged in official summaries. It had never been referenced in estate briefings. It had simply existed, silent, patient, waiting. William's fingers lingered on the seal longer than he expected. For a man trained to maintain composure under global scrutiny, this moment was dangerously intimate. Seeing Diana's name attached to something hidden stirred an ache that never truly faded. Grief does not disappear in royal households. It is simply dressed in ceremony. And yet this was different. This was not a public memory. This was private, untouched, deliberately withheld. As the envelope was opened, tension rippled quietly through the room. The contents were brief, handwritten, deliberate. There was no legal formatting, no official crest, just words from a mother thinking beyond her own lifetime. Early lines spoke of legacy, not of crowns or titles, but of meaning, of symbolism, of protection. And then, almost casually, came the first unmistakable reference to her jewelry collection, the Spencer pieces, the iconic gems that had dazzled on global stages and carried stories of both triumph and suffering. William felt the weight of those jewels long before he felt the weight of the words that followed. Those pieces had always represented something sacred within the fractured narrative of the royal family. They were reminders of Diana's grace under pressure, her ability to shine even while breaking. And now, in ink that time had not erased, she spoke of assigning them not through official channels, but through personal intention. The atmosphere shifted. Advisors who moments earlier had been procedural now stood guarded. Because inheritance inside royal circles is never merely sentimental. It is strategic. Every jewel carries a message. Every transfer signals alignment. And as William's eyes traced further down the page, the realization began to crystallize that this letter was not a simple note of affection. It was a decision, a choice made quietly, a wish left unspoken in public life. The name itself had not yet fully registered in his mind, but its presence lingered like a tremor beneath the surface. Diana had envisioned a future, a specific future, and she had written it down. The implications were enormous, not only for family dynamics, but for the unspoken agreements that had governed her legacy for decades. What unsettled William most was not the jewelry. It was the secrecy. Why had this letter remained buried? Who had chosen silence? And why now, after so many years, had it surfaced in his hands? The answers were not immediately clear, but one truth had already begun to take shape. This was no accident. This was timing. And timing in royal history is never random. As the final lines came into focus, William understood that this discovery was not simply about inheritance. It was about intention, about a mother reaching beyond mortality to shape a narrative she would never live to witness. And in that quiet, controlled room, surrounded by history and expectation, Prince William realized that the past had just collided with the future in a way that could not be undone. But what William read next would ignite a storm he never saw coming. and force him to question everything he thought he knew about his mother's final wishes. The letter wasn't long, but it was devastating. In unmistakable handwriting, Princess Diana outlined a private decision, one never discussed publicly, never recorded in official wills, a personal wish, a quiet assignment of her most treasured jewelry, and the name written beneath it stunned Prince William into silence. Because it wasn't for him. It wasn't even for Harry. It was for someone who hadn't even been born yet. Her words did not read like a royal directive. They read like a mother, speaking softly into the future. There was tenderness in every line, but also an unmistakable firmness, as if she understood that what she was writing would one day require courage from the person who discovered it. She spoke of legacy not as wealth, but as protection. She described her jewels, the sapphires, the pearls, the diamonds that had witnessed both fairy tale beginnings and public heartbreak, not as ornaments, but as symbols of endurance. These were the pieces she wore while the world watched her unravel and rise again. They were armor disguised as elegance, and then came the phrase that made William's breath catch: "For my future granddaughter." Not a vague hope, not a poetic gesture, a declaration. She wrote it with intention, underlined by something that felt almost prophetic. Diana, in her private reflection, envisioned a child not yet born, a girl who would carry innocence, untouched by palace politics. And beneath that sentence, written clearly and without hesitation, was the name Lilibet. The name carried weight beyond the page. It echoed with royal history, with memory, with layers of complexity. William stared at it, unable to reconcile the timeline in his mind. Diana could not have known this child personally, yet here she was, assigning her most personal collection not to her sons, not to the institution, but to a granddaughter she believed would one day exist. It felt deliberate, it felt protective, and it felt, in some quiet way, like a message. She explained herself in language that felt almost fragile. She wrote of continuity, of safeguarding something pure amid inevitable storms. She spoke about how jewels could become burdens if placed in the wrong hands, how symbolism could heal or divide depending on intention. There was no bitterness in her tone, but there was awareness, a recognition that her life had been both elevated and wounded by the crown. And through that awareness, she seemed determined to shield the next generation differently. For William, the emotional impact was immediate and disorienting. Shock collided with disbelief. Part of him wanted to question the practicality of it all. How could a private note override years of understood arrangements? Yet another part of him, the son who still carried unresolved grief, recognized his mother's voice with painful clarity. This was how she spoke when she was most sincere, direct, unfiltered, loving, but resolute. The implications pressed in from every direction. If honored, the letter would quietly redirect the symbolic heart of Diana's legacy. If dismissed, it would mean ignoring her written wish. Advisors would undoubtedly argue that without formal legal standing, the document was sentimental at best. Already tension was forming beneath the surface. Does personal intent carry authority when history is watching? Does a mother's handwritten promise outweigh institutional expectation? William felt the weight of more than jewels in that moment. He felt the burden of interpretation. To accept the letter was to accept that Diana had looked beyond him, beyond Harry, and placed her faith in a future that disrupted established lines. To reject it was to risk silencing her once again. And somewhere within that internal storm, another realization surfaced. This letter had not been misplaced. It had been kept, quietly, deliberately, hidden from view until now. And as the meaning of those words settled in, a deeper question began to rise. Why had this been hidden for so long? Behind palace walls, jewels are never just jewels. They are power, legacy, control. And when Diana's private wishes surfaced, it threatened a delicate balance already strained by distance, resentment, and fractured loyalty. The discovery wasn't just emotional, it was political, because assigning her collection to Lilibet would disrupt everything the palace had quietly arranged for decades. Diana's jewelry has always existed at the intersection of glamour and symbolism. Every sapphire, every diamond, every luminous pearl carried a narrative larger than fashion. They were worn at state banquets, diplomatic tours, historic ceremonies. They shimmered beneath chandeliers and camera flashes, but beneath their brilliance lay something deeper: public memory. The sapphire engagement ring became a global icon. The pearl chokers symbolized composure during chaos. These pieces were never merely adornments. They were chapters of a story the world felt entitled to inherit. Within royal tradition, such collections are rarely governed by personal whim. They flow through quiet understandings, informal but powerful expectations passed between generations. There are assumptions about who will wear what, about how legacy will be preserved, about how continuity must appear seamless to the public eye. For years it had been quietly presumed that Diana's most significant pieces would remain within a predictable path shared between her sons' families, gradually absorbed into the future queen's public role. Stability through symbolism, that was the unspoken rule. But Diana's letter fractured that assumption with a single name. By directing the heart of her private collection toward Lilibet, she shifted the axis of expectation, not toward the immediate line of succession, not toward institutional continuity, toward a child whose very existence carried complex emotional weight within the family. The implications were undeniable. This was not only about inheritance, it was about alignment. William understood the stakes instinctively. As future king, he has been trained to guard tradition fiercely. The monarchy survives on predictability, on carefully managed optics, on the assurance that nothing fractures publicly. His protective instincts stirred immediately. Could honoring this letter signal instability? Could it deepen already visible divides? Would it invite speculation about favoritism, about reconciliation, about past tensions that had never fully healed? And then there were the unavoidable implications for Harry and Meghan. Though the letter spoke only of Lilibet, it could not be separated from her parents. Granting her the jewels would be interpreted as a gesture, a message, perhaps even an endorsement. Some within palace corridors feared it would reignite debates long thought contained. Others warned that denying the letter would appear cold, even dismissive of Diana's voice. There was no neutral ground. Advisors began quietly outlining risks, public reaction, media narratives, questions about legal standing. They spoke in measured tones, but beneath their caution lay anxiety. Because if this letter became known, it would reopen conversations the institution preferred remain settled. It would invite scrutiny, not just of inheritance, but of loyalty and estrangement. And in royal politics, perception often outweighs reality. Subtle resistance surfaced almost immediately. Not overt defiance, but hesitation, suggestions that perhaps the letter was sentimental rather than binding, that perhaps honoring it privately would be wiser than acknowledging it publicly, that perhaps tradition should remain undisturbed. The arguments were practical, strategic, yet beneath them lingered something else, a reluctance to allow Diana's private intention to override decades of institutional choreography. William felt the tension pressing in from every direction. On one side stood duty, continuity, the careful preservation of an image crafted over generations. On the other stood his mother's unmistakable handwriting, her deliberate choice, her plea for symbolic protection. The jewels had once reflected light. Now they reflected fault lines. The political storm was forming quietly, its winds gathering strength behind closed doors. Every option carried consequence. Every silence carried implication. And as strategy collided with sentiment, William realized that this battle would not be fought only in council rooms, it would be fought within him. But as advisors debated protocol, William faced something far more personal, his own unresolved grief. For Prince William, the discovery wasn't just political, it was painfully intimate. Because honoring the letter would mean reaching across a divide that had only grown wider with time. And for the first time, the memory of their mother didn't unite the brothers, it complicated them. The question lingered in silence. Was this Diana's final act of reconciliation, or her most controversial decision? The ache William felt was not new. It was the same ache born in hospital corridors, strengthened during public mourning, sharpened by years of living under shared trauma. He and Harry had once been bound by something unbreakable, the loss of a mother the world adored, but never fully understood. They walked behind her coffin together. They endured headlines together. They carried the same silence. And yet somewhere along the way, that shared grief had splintered into separate narratives. Now, staring at her handwriting, William could not escape the memory of who they used to be. Two boys navigating a storm too large for their age. Diana had often spoken of protecting them, of ensuring they remained united against pressures neither chose. But this letter, intentional and precise, seemed to stretch beyond that unity. It placed its faith not in the brothers directly, but in the next generation, specifically in Lilibet, a child whose name carried layers of history and complexity. The name itself held symbolic gravity. Lilibet was not just any name. It echoed with royal heritage, with affection, with private identity turned public. For William, the choice felt deliberate. Diana had understood the power of names, of gestures, of subtle signals. Was she imagining a future where healing would be needed? Was she offering a bridge before the divide even formed? Or had she sensed that legacy might one day require rage beyond her sons? William's thoughts spiraled. If he honored the letter, would it be seen as validation of one side? Would it deepen narratives already shaped by distance and disagreement? There was fear there, not of confrontation, but of consequence. The institution rarely rewards emotional decisions. It rewards stability, predictability, control. And yet nothing about this moment felt controllable. Inside palace corridors, the pressure was quiet but unmistakable. There was reluctance to reopen wounds that had barely scarred. Some believed silence would preserve fragile equilibrium. Others warned that revisiting Diana's private wishes could reignite dormant tensions. William listened. He always listened. But beneath the counsel, beneath the strategy, his internal conflict grew louder. He was not only a brother, he was the future king. Every choice he made would ripple far beyond personal intention. To act from the heart risked political interpretation. To act from protocol risked betraying the woman whose voice still shaped him. The psychological weight of that balance pressed heavily. William had spent years learning how to carry duty without visible strain. Yet this felt different. This was not a matter of public ceremony. This was a matter of memory. He imagined the conversation that had not yet happened, the one that would require vulnerability instead of authority, the one where grief would need to be acknowledged rather than managed. He knew it would not be simple. Old wounds have a way of resurfacing when legacy is involved. But avoiding the conversation would not erase the letter. It would only delay the reckoning. In the quiet moments after reading those words, William felt something unsettling. Uncertainty. Not about his love for his mother, not about his responsibility, but about whether honoring both was even possible. Diana's handwriting had reached across decades to confront him with a choice that felt both deeply personal and profoundly public. And just as he began to brace himself for the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead, something else shifted. Another detail emerged from the archives, another layer of truth that reframed everything he thought he understood about the letter. Yet before any conversation could happen, another revelation surfaced, one that made the letter impossible to ignore. If the letter was real, everything would change. But if it wasn't, the fallout could be catastrophic. Handwriting analysts were quietly consulted. Paper aging tests were discreetly performed. And what they discovered sent a chill through the corridors of power. Because every examination pointed to one undeniable truth: Diana had written it herself. The verification process unfolded in silence, shielded from public knowledge and even from many within the palace itself. Experts were approached not through official announcements, but through carefully worded requests, framed as routine archival authentication. Yet nothing about this felt routine. The handwriting was scrutinized stroke by stroke, each curve and flourish compared against dozens of confirmed samples from Diana's private correspondence. Analysts noted the subtle pressure patterns in the ink, the distinctive slant that grew firmer when she expressed conviction. There was hesitation in some lines, warmth in others. It was unmistakable. It was hers. Then came the material analysis. The paper was tested for composition and aging markers. its fibers examined for consistency with supplies available during Diana's final years. The ink was analyzed chemically, its degradation measured against time. Quiet reports returned one after another, each reinforcing the same conclusion. The letter was not recent fabrication. It belonged to the era it claimed. The timeline, a line, ed with her last chapter, those complex years marked by independence, reflection, and an acute awareness of her own mortality. But perhaps most unsettling was not what the tests confirmed. It was what the records did not show. The letter had never appeared in official estate summaries. It was absent from probate documentation. There was no public mention, no trace in legal inventories that were once believed comprehensive. Its omission was not accidental oversight, it was deliberate exclusion. Someone had chosen not to surface it. Someone had decided silence was preferable to disclosure. That realization shifted the atmosphere entirely. Authentication did not bring relief, it intensified the stakes. If the letter had been intentionally withheld, the question was no longer about its legitimacy. It was about motive. Who had access at the time? Who had the authority to archive it without registering it? And, more importantly, why? The deeper investigators looked, the clearer it became that the document had been quietly filed away, rather than lost, preserved, but hidden. Speculation moved cautiously through inner circles. Some suggested that advisors in the chaotic aftermath of Diana's passing might have deemed it too sensitive. Others wondered whether revealing such a specific assignment would have sparked unnecessary tension during an already fragile period. There were theories, but no definitive answers. And in royal matters, unanswered questions often carry more weight than confirmed ones. For William, the confirmation was transformative. Doubt had provided a shield, a way to delay action, to question interpretation. But authenticity stripped that shield away. This was not rumor, not manipulation, not wishful thinking. It was his mother's voice, preserved in ink and time. And now that its legitimacy was beyond dispute, ignoring it would not be oversight. It would be choice. The possibility of exposure loomed ever larger. The more individuals involved in verification, the greater the risk of leaks. In an era where secrets rarely remain contained, the existence of the letter was already a vulnerability. If it reached the media uncontrolled, the narrative would be shaped externally. Headlines would not focus on nuance, they would focus on division. The pressure to act grew heavier by the day. William understood the gravity with sobering clarity. Authentication did not simplify the path ahead. It complicated it, because truth demands response. And once truth is verified, neutrality becomes impossible. Now, with authenticity confirmed, William faced the most difficult choice of his life. Future kings are trained to protect the crown, but what happens when protecting the crown means defying it? Prince William stood at a crossroads: honor his mother's private wish and risk institutional chaos, or preserve royal stability and silence her final request forever. Either way, someone would lose. And this time, it wasn't about politics. It was about legacy. The guidance surrounding him was calm, measured, strategic. Advisors spoke of prudence, of timing, of containment. They warned that public acknowledgement of the letter could reopen old divisions and invite relentless scrutiny. The monarchy, they reminded him, survives on steadiness. It cannot afford sudden emotional gestures that ripple into speculation. Discretion, they insisted, would protect everyone involved. Quiet resolution, private respect, no headlines, no statements. Let the matter rest where it had rested for years unseen. But William knew that silence is never neutral. Silence shapes narratives just as powerfully as declaration. If he fulfilled Diana's wish, privately transferring the jewels to Lilibet, without public acknowledgement, he could honor her intention while shielding the institution from storm. Yet even that carried risk. Secrets have a way of surfacing, and if such a transfer were later revealed, it would not be framed as compassion. It would be framed as concealment. He found himself replaying memories of his mother, not as the icon the world adored, but as the woman who valued authenticity above protocol. Diana had never been comfortable with rigid silence when truth demanded voice. She believed symbols mattered because they carried meaning for people beyond palace gates, and these jewels, her jewels, had become extensions of her resilience. Passing them to Lilibet was not merely sentimental, it was symbolic continuity, a thread tying innocence to endurance. Yet the crown does not operate on symbolism alone, it operates on perception. Advisors outlined potential media narratives with precision. Some would interpret the move as reconciliation, others would cast it as favoritism. Still others would portray it as weakness, a future king swayed by emotion rather than guided by institution. Every scenario ended with scrutiny. Every path required explanation. The internal conflict intensified. On one side stood duty, tradition, the weight of centuries pressing forward. On the other stood maternal legacy, handwritten and unmistakable. The crown demands loyalty to structure. A son demands loyalty to memory. William felt the strain of carrying both identities at once. He had spent his life preparing to inherit responsibility, not controversy. Yet here it was, unavoidable and deeply personal. He considered the deeper meaning of the transfer. Jewelry in royal history is rarely random. It signals belonging. It signals trust. By naming Lilibet, Diana may have been imagining a future beyond fracture, a future where generational innocence would soften inherited tensions. Or perhaps she foresaw division and sought to counterbalance it through deliberate ace. The intention remained open to interpretation, but its existence was undeniable. The realization that any decision would be irreversible settled heavily. Once acted upon, it could not be undone. Public or private, acknowledgement or silence, the consequences would ripple for decades. This was not a matter that could be postponed indefinitely. Delay itself was becoming a decision. And just as William began to steady himself, preparing to move forward with clarity born from conviction rather than fear, something shifted beyond the palace's carefully guarded walls. The quiet circle of those aware of the letter had grown too large. Information, once contained, had begun to travel. Whispers turned into inquiries. Inquiries edged toward speculation. The moment for private contemplation was narrowing rapidly. The choice he had hoped to control was slipping toward public arena. The storm he had tried to anticipate was beginning to gather on its own. But just as William prepared to act, news of the letter began to leak. It started as a whisper, then a headline. Within hours, speculation erupted worldwide. Diana's secret letter, Lilibet's inheritance, William's silence. The palace scrambled to contain the narrative, but the story was already out. And once the world knew, there was no turning back. The first reports were cautious, almost hesitant, hinting at newly uncovered correspondence tied to Princess Diana's personal effects. But caution does not survive long in the modern media storm. By nightfall, the phrasing had sharpened. Secret letter, hidden inheritance, assigned jewels. The language escalated with every refresh. News anchors invoked Diana's name with reverence and urgency, framing the revelation as both emotional and explosive. Social media amplified every fragment, turning speculation into momentum. For the public, Diana remains more than memory, she is symbol, story, unfinished chapter. The idea that she had left behind a private message assigning her treasured jewelry to Lilibet ignited something powerful. It felt intimate. It felt protective. It felt like a mother still reaching through time. Admirers spoke of destiny, of poetic justice. Critics questioned timing, motive, and implication. And, as often happens when Diana's name resurfaces, the world divided into camps almost instantly. Lilibet's name began trending globally within hours. Commentators dissected its symbolism, its connection to royal heritage, its weight within a family narrative already strained by distance. Every angle was explored. Was this a gesture of reconciliation? A subtle statement? A deliberate message from beyond? The questions multiplied faster than answers could contain them. Inside palace walls, urgency replaced deliberation. Communications teams drafted statements that said everything and nothing at once. Phrases like private family matter and respect for legacy circulated carefully. No confirmation, no denial. Strategic ambiguity became the shield of choice. But silence, once protective, now felt reactive. The longer William refrained from addressing the story directly, the louder the speculation grew. Pressure mounted with relentless intensity. Analysts debated whether his quiet stance signaled internal disagreement or thoughtful restraint. Commentators revived old narratives of brotherly tension, weaving the letter into pre-existing fractures. The story was no longer confined to duels, it became shorthand for unresolved conflict, generational shift, and the delicate balance between monarchy and modernity. For William, the loss of control over timing was jarring. What had been a private reckoning was now public theatre. The option of quiet resolution was evaporating in real time. Every hour that passed without clarity allowed others to shape the narrative for him. And narratives, once established, are difficult to reclaim. The impossibility of returning to secrecy became painfully clear. The letter, once hidden in archival silence, now lived in headlines and hashtags. The more the palace attempted measured restraint, the more audiences interpreted it as avoidance. The Crown's traditional strategy, wait, steady, endure, felt inadequate against the velocity of modern exposure. Yet beneath the frenzy lay something deeper: expectation. The world was watching not merely for confirmation, but for character. Would William honor Diana publicly? Would he protect institutional order? Would he bridge division or fortify it? The moment had become symbolic far beyond its material value. In the chaos, amid flashing commentary and endless debate, William understood one unavoidable truth: inaction was no longer neutral. The storm would not pass on its own. It required decision. It required presence. It required him. And in the midst of the chaos, William finally made his move. In a quiet but decisive gesture, Prince William chose his mother. Not the institution, not tradition, her. The jewelry, each piece infused with Diana's story, would be preserved for Lilibet, just as the letter requested. It wasn't about sides. It wasn't about rivalry. It was about a promise, written in ink and sealed in memory. The decision did not arrive with fanfare. There was no dramatic announcement, no triumphant declaration. It came through stillness, through acceptance, through a long private reckoning that ended not in strategy, but in clarity. William understood at last that the letter was not a challenge to the crown, it was a continuation of his mother's values. She had always believed that legacy meant more than inheritance. It meant protection. It meant safeguarding innocence where she had once felt exposed, and in recognizing that, something inside him settled. Arrangements were made quietly, but this time not in secrecy, rather in intention. The jewels would be catalogued under a future trust, aligned specifically with Lilibet's name, preserved until the moment she was ready to understand their weight, not as ornaments, not as trophies, but as stories, as reminders of resilience. William ensured the transfer was structured carefully, transparently within private family frameworks, removing room for speculation about concealment. The message was subtle but unmistakable. This was fulfillment, not favoritism. In framing Lilibet as guardian of the collection, William reframed the narrative itself. The child was not positioned as a symbol of division, but as embodiment of continuity, innocence inheriting endurance, future inheriting memory. The move did not erase past fractures, but it refused to let them dictate tomorrow. It was an act of quiet defiance, not against his brother, not against the institution, but against the idea. That legacy must always follow rigid lines. Emotionally, the choice brought a measure of closure William had not anticipated. For years, grief had lived inside him, as unfinished conversation. Diana's voice, interrupted too soon. Her guidance, forever incomplete. But honoring her written wish created something new, a sense of dialogue restored. He could not ask her questions, but he could respond to what she left behind. In doing so, he felt less like a custodian of history and more like a son honoring a promise. Public reaction shifted gradually. Headlines that once screamed scandal softened into reflection. Commentators began to speak not of rivalry, but of tribute. The focus moved from controversy to compassion. People saw a son choosing memory over calculation, a future king demonstrating that strength does not always look like rigidity. It sometimes looks like honoring a mother's handwriting. The crown did not crumble, tradition did not collapse. Instead, something unexpected happened, legacy expanded. By respecting Diana's private intention, William showed that monarchy could evolve without unraveling, that symbolism could heal rather than divide. That leadership sometimes requires stepping beyond comfort into conviction, and in that bittersweet resolution, Diana's presence felt closer than ever, not as myth, not as martyr, but as mother. Her jewels would one day rest with a granddaughter she never met, yet somehow imagined, her intention, once hidden in archival silence, now woven quietly into the family's future. Because even decades later, Princess Diana proved that her voice written in secret could still reshape the destiny of a royal generation. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.